Have you ever wondered why a man who once let go of a woman, who thought he could replace her or outlast her silence, inevitably finds himself circling back to the one who walked away? This question haunts the corridors of the male psyche, not because the answer is simple, but because it is buried in the hidden caverns of shadow and desire, pride and fear, love and projection. Jung would remind us that what pulls him back is not merely her presence, but the archetype she embodies, the silent, untouchable figure who no longer feeds his ego, who no longer kneels at the altar of his approval. When a woman chooses silence over drama, she fractures the predictable pattern of masculine expectation. He expects pleading, explanation, tears, or rage, but she offers none. Instead, she embodies stillness, detachment, and the cold dignity of absence. This silence becomes unbearable precisely because it mirrors back to him something he cannot control: his own emptiness. He is forced to face the abyss of his shadow, the hollowed places within him that were once disguised by her availability. And this is where the dark psychology begins. The man does not simply miss her, he obsesses, not with her as a person, but with the part of himself she carries away when she departs. Her withdrawal deprives him of the projection he once lived through. He realizes, often too late, that she was not just a woman, she was a mirror for his unintegrated soul. In her presence, he avoided confronting the deeper truth of his incompleteness. In her silence, he is left naked before himself. You must understand, silence has a voice. It is sharper than accusation, colder than blame, more final than words. Silence leaves a man alone with his demons. And when those demons whisper in the night, when they remind him of his failures, his pride, his need for validation, it is her image that rises, because she represents both the wound and the medicine. The more he resists, the tighter the spiral becomes. He returns not because she begged him to, but because his unconscious drags him back. From a Jungian lens, this is the enigma at work, the feminine aspect of his unconscious. If he has not integrated it, he will forever project it outward, attaching it to a woman, needing her presence to feel whole. And when she walks away, the enigma rips from him like flesh from bone. He will search for substitutes, for distractions, for louder voices, brighter faces, softer bodies. But the archetype remains. Hers, the woman who chose herself instead of him, the woman who became untouchable by choosing silence. Most men cannot tolerate this untouchable energy. It reminds them of their lack of mastery over life, their inability to bend reality to their will. So they fight against it with anger, with pride, with conquest. Yet the fight collapses in the quiet hours of the night. He cannot escape her absence. He cannot erase the echo of the silence she left. And so he returns, not to dominate, but to attempt to reclaim the part of himself he lost. But here lies the paradox. His return is rarely about love. It is about hunger, control, unfinished business with his own psyche. If you, the woman, mistake his return for devotion, you risk falling into the same cycle again. He comes back not because he has transformed, but because her absence unsettled him more than her presence ever did. He confuses the ache of emptiness with the call of love. And yet, this ache is not love. It is the shadow, demanding to be seen. Women who understand this dynamic begin to see their silence not as weakness, but as an instrument of power. Walking away without theatrics, choosing dignity over chaos, forces the man to face himself. And if he cannot face himself, he will chase her, return to her, orbit her. For in her refusal, she becomes sovereign. Her silence transforms into the language of self-respect, and in that moment, she becomes archetypal, no longer just a woman in his story, but the embodiment of the feminine mystery that his soul cannot conquer. And here is the dark truth. The woman who walks away teaches a man more than the one who stays. She teaches him the unbearable weight of loss. She teaches him that not every story bends to his desire. She teaches him that silence can carve deeper wounds than words. And in teaching him these truths, she holds a mirror to his soul, whether he has the courage to face it or not. When she walks away, she does not simply remove her body from his reach. She withdraws the energy that once sustained him. That energy was a current he barely noticed while it flowed, yet once gone, it becomes the absence that defines his nights. He remembers the way her gaze anchored him when his mind was restless, the way her presence filled the cracks in his identity. Now, those cracks yawn open and the shadow seeps in. Jung taught us that the shadow cannot be destroyed. It must be faced. But most men do not face it. They project it. And so he projects it back onto her, as if she is the thief who stole his peace, when in reality, she only revealed the emptiness that was always his. The man convinces himself that he returns because of her unique qualities, her beauty, her warmth, her understanding. But this is only the mask. Beneath it, he returns because she forced him into confrontation with himself. She is the reminder of what he has not mastered, the unsolvable equation that gnaws at his pride. Other women may flatter him, submit to him, admire him. They may provide comfort, but comfort is not confrontation. Without confrontation, the psyche does not evolve, and so he circles back to the woman who refuses to feed him illusions, the one who shattered his delusion of control by leaving without noise. Silence is not passive, it is active, charged, magnetic. In Stoic philosophy, silence is equated with strength, for it demonstrates mastery over impulse. Seneca once said that true power is not found in outward conquest, but in mastery over oneself. The silent woman embodies this principle. She does not argue, does not beg, does not barter for recognition. She simply withdraws, embodying the Stoic dignity of detachment. And this detachment is unbearable to the man who has built his worth upon being needed. You may have felt it yourself. That moment when he returns, speaking of regret, weaving stories of clarity. But the question must rise within you. Does he return out of love or out of lack? The two are not the same. Love arises from wholeness. Lack arises from emptiness. Love gives, lack consumes. If he returns from lack, he will drain again, for the wound he carries remains unhealed. He does not seek you, but the anesthetic you once provided against his loneliness. This cycle reveals the darker architecture of human desire. What is denied becomes more powerful than what is granted. The woman who stays available becomes invisible, taken for granted by the psyche that craves conquest. But the woman who walks away, who denies access without words, becomes immortalized in memory. She haunts not as a ghost of love, but as an unsolved riddle of power. It is here that Jung's teaching on projection deepens. The man believes he is chasing her, but in truth, he is chasing the anima, his own unclaimed feminine essence. He believes she holds the key, but the key lies within him, waiting to be recognized. Until he integrates it, until he learns to nourish his own soul without devouring another, he will remain chained to the cycle of returning, leaving, and returning again. And you, the woman, must see clearly. You are not the missing piece of his puzzle. You are the mirror reflecting the pieces he refuses to claim. And yet, there is beauty in this recognition. For when you understand why he returns, you no longer mistake his return for validation. You begin to see the power of your silence, the weight of your departure, the sovereignty in your detachment. You are no longer ensnared in the illusion that his obsession equals love. Instead, you stand in the awareness that your presence was a gift, and your absence became his teacher. The dark psychology of why he comes back is not rooted in romance, but in archetype. not in devotion, but in deprivation. He returns because your silence exposed him. He returns because you remind him of the part of himself he cannot conquer. He returns because you embody the feminine force that no argument, no conquest, no substitute can erase. But here lies the greater truth. The woman who knows this does not need him to return, for she understands that her worth was never measured by his presence, nor diminished by his departure. The one who walks away in silence walks toward herself, and in that journey, she becomes not the wound, but the healer, not the mirror, but the source. His return is rarely sudden. It brews quietly, like a storm gathering over calm waters. He may distract himself with new faces, with fleeting validations, with shallow affirmations that mask his inner famine. Yet, beneath every smile and every conquest, there lingers the silhouette of the one who walked away. This is not nostalgia. It is obsession, an unconscious pull that no amount of distraction can erase. The mind returns again and again to the unsolved mystery, for what is unresolved exerts the greatest psychological gravity. In Jungian psychology, what we resist persists. And he resists her absence with all the defenses he can summon. He tells himself he never cared, that she was replaceable, that she will regret walking away. But his words collapse in the quiet hours when the ego sleeps, and the subconscious speaks louder than his pride. It is then that the silence she left becomes deafening, pressing against him like a weight he cannot escape. He does not miss her words. He misses the reflection of himself he found in her gaze, the fragile scaffolding of identity she once held for him. Without her, he feels the fracture of his own unintegrated and self. The paradox is cruel. The more he resists, the deeper the pull becomes. He returns not as a master, but as a captive of his own psyche. He may cloak his return in apologies, in declarations, in promises of change. But beneath the mask lies the same shadow, the hunger for what her absence forced him to confront. His need for her is not born from wholeness, but from fragmentation. He wants her not as she is, but as the balm that soothes his wound, the mirror that reassures his ego, the silence that once unraveled him. And you, the woman, must see clearly. His return is not proof of your worth, but proof of his lack. Do not confuse his obsession with devotion. Devotion grows from respect. Obsession grows from fear. Devotion honors your freedom. Obsession seeks to possess it. Devotion builds. Obsession consumes. When he returns, he may kneel at the threshold of your silence, but it is not you he seeks. It is escape from the shadow that your absence awakened. The Stoics remind us that control lies not in the external, but in the self. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If his thoughts are colored by fear, regret, and unhealed wounds, then every return will carry the same stain. He cannot give what he has not cultivated within. His love, if undeveloped, will always be tethered to his need, and you are not called to carry the burden of his unfinished becoming. The woman who walked away becomes an archetype of sovereignty. She does not chase validation, nor does she soften her boundaries for the sake of his comfort. She embodies the anima he cannot yet claim within himself, the reminder of depth, mystery, and wholeness he has yet to earn. And so, she stands as both his torment and his teacher. She does not teach through words, but through absence, not through correction, but through the silent weight of self-respect. Consider the gravity of this position. When you choose silence, you activate the deepest layers of his unconscious. You awaken the tension between his ego and his shadow, his desire and his fear, his longing and his pride. Few men can survive such confrontation without attempting to return, for silence strips them of the illusion of control. The very act of walking away becomes alchemical. It transforms you from a figure in his story into the embodiment of an archetype he cannot conquer. But understand this too. Your power lies not in his return, but in your refusal to measure yourself by it. The woman who walks away does not wait for him to come back. She builds a life that does not need his presence to be whole. She becomes her own sanctuary, her own reflection, her own source of validation, and it is this wholeness that terrifies him most, because it is what he lacks and what he cannot yet create within himself. Thus, his return is inevitable, but its meaning is fragile. It is not a testament to his strength, but to his weakness. It is not a vow of love, but an admission of hunger. And, if you are wise, you will see through the illusion, recognizing that true love cannot be born from the shadow's desperation. Only when he has faced himself, integrated his anima, and mastered his own silence will his return carry truth. Until then, his footsteps at your door are echoes of his unfinished war with himself. There is a haunting rhythm to his return, as though fate pulls him back to the very threshold he once abandoned. But fate is not what drives him. It is psychology, deep and unyielding, a web spun by his own unconscious. The woman who walks away becomes the axis upon which his unresolved archetypes revolve. She represents not just herself, but the mystery of all that he cannot own within. In Jung's language, she is the anima unclaimed, the shadow unacknowledged, the self half hidden in the darkness. And when she withdraws, she tears the veil he so carefully draped over his fragmentation. This tearing wounds him more deeply than he admits. Men often cloak their pain in indifference, but silence gnaws where words cannot soothe. The silence of her absence becomes a mirror that no longer flatters but reveals. He sees in it the hollowness of his identity, the fragility of his pride, the hunger of his ego. He does not simply long for her. He longs for the reflection she once offered, the scaffolding she unwittingly built for his self-image. Without it, he is left in ruins, his ego trembling before the abyss of incompleteness. It is here that the dark psychology of return takes root. He convinces himself that no other woman compares, that she alone held a secret essence, that her uniqueness is irreplaceable. But what he truly craves is not her essence, but her refusal, her withdrawal, her silence, her walk away. These are the forces that fractured his illusion of control. And what the ego cannot control, it obsesses over. The more she resists, the more he pursues. The more she remains silent, the louder his psyche demands resolution. Yet this is not love. In its highest form, it is compulsion. Compulsion born from shadow, fueled by pride, sustained by fear of inadequacy. He may dress it in the language of love, whispering words of devotion at her door. But if the woman listens closely, she will hear the tremor of desperation beneath his tone. He does not come offering fullness. He comes begging to be made whole. And what is begged for cannot sustain love, only dependency. You must understand the depth of this trap. When you mistake his return for transformation, you risk falling into the cycle again, believing his hunger to be devotion, confusing his obsession for respect. But obsession does not respect, it devours. Respect honors your boundaries, your silence, your sovereignty. Obsession seeks to break them, to pull you back into the orbit of his unresolved psyche. The Stoics spoke often of detachment, of the need to free oneself from the illusions of external validation. Epictetus warned that if you base your worth on another's recognition, you surrender your freedom. The woman who walks away becomes sovereign precisely because she withdraws her worth from the scales of his desire. She chooses silence, and in doing so, she chooses herself. This choice unsettles him more than any accusation could, for it removes the illusion of power from his hands. And so he returns. Again and again, he returns. But with each return, the woman is given a choice: to see through the shadow and remain sovereign, or to mistake his hunger for love and fall once more into his cycle. Her silence is both shield and sword. It protects her dignity and cuts through his illusions. If she holds it, she becomes unshakable, an archetype beyond his grasp. The psychology of his return reveals an ancient truth: what is denied burns brighter than what is given. The woman who stayed available may be overlooked, but the woman who walked away becomes unforgettable. She becomes the unanswered riddle, the closed door, the silence that humbles his ego, and in that silence lies her greatest power, not to punish, but to transcend. For she teaches without words, she heals without touch, she transforms by simply refusing to be consumed. In the end, his return is less about her and more about him, less about love and more about shadow, less about devotion and more about lack. She must never forget this, for the true empowerment lies not in whether he comes back, but in her ability to stand unmoved when he does, to recognize that her worth was never tied to his footsteps, his attention, or his longing. That the woman who walks away in silence has already chosen the highest form of love of self. The longer she remains beyond his reach, the more she becomes myth rather than memory. In his psyche, she evolves from a woman of flesh and voice into an archetype carved into the walls of his unconscious. He begins to recall not her flaws, not the ordinary tensions of two human beings, but her silence, her withdrawal, her refusal to submit to his gravity. That refusal becomes holy, sacred even, because it is the one thing he cannot undo. Every man is haunted by what he cannot conquer, and she becomes that haunting. This is the secret of her power. She did not fight for a place in his life. She vacated it. And in vacating it, she revealed a truth he cannot escape. He was never the center of her world, no matter how much his ego believed it. He returns not to reclaim her body, but to reclaim the illusion that he mattered more than he did. His pride bleeds in her absence, and pride, when wounded, seeks to heal itself through pursuit. He convinces himself he is chasing her, but in truth, he is chasing the parts of himself that her departure exposed. Jung would call this the confrontation with the self. The anima, the feminine within him, remains unintegrated, and so he projects it onto her. When she leaves, that projection collapses, leaving him face to face with his own deficiency. He feels stripped of color, of meaning, of vitality. She carried away his reflection, and without it, he feels invisible to himself. He does not realize that what he misses most is not her, but the man he thought he was when she reflected him. And this is why he returns again and again. Not for her laughter, not for her touch, not even for her love, but for the illusion of wholeness that her presence once gave him. This is the dark psychology of his longing. It is less about devotion and more about desperation, less about her essence and more about his fracture. He believes he must have her, but what he truly craves is relief from the abyss her silence forced him to face. To the woman, this knowledge is liberation. For once you understand why he returns, you no longer tremble at his absence nor glow at his reappearance. You see through the veil of his hunger and recognize it for what it is, an unhealed wound, and you are not called to heal it. That work belongs to him, and him alone. When you refuse to carry his shadow, you return it to its rightful owner. In doing so, you step fully into your sovereignty. The Stoics knew this freedom well. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that nothing outside the soul's domain can truly harm it. The woman who walks away becomes the embodiment of this wisdom. She does not collapse at his return nor melt at his attention. She remains still, knowing that her worth is not amplified by his obsession nor diminished by his silence. Her worth is sovereign, untouchable, odd, eternal. And so the cycle reveals itself for what it is. Not a story of love lost and found, but of the psyche's endless war with itself. His footsteps at her door are not an anthem of devotion, but the echoes of a battle within. He is not drawn to her as she is. He is pulled by the unresolved parts of himself she once carried unknowingly. She was the stage upon which his inner conflicts played out. By walking away, she dismantled the stage, and now he stumbles through the ruins, searching for the script that once defined him. If she receives him again, she risks becoming the stage once more, holding his weight until it breaks her. If she remains sovereign, she forces him to meet himself. Her silence then becomes not only a weapon, but also a gift. For it pushes him toward individuation, the process Jung described as the integration of the unconscious with the conscious self. Whether he accepts that invitation is not her burden. Her role was never to complete him, only to mirror him long, enough for him to see what he denied. And here, in this recognition, lies her ultimate rebirth. She is no longer the mirror, no longer the projection, no longer the scapegoat of his shadow. She is the sovereign woman who chooses silence, who chooses dignity, who chooses herself. And in choosing herself, she transcends the cycle. His return may come, but it no longer defines her. His longing may ache, but it no longer binds her. She becomes the center of her own world, the voice in her own silence, the source of her own worth. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.